Live from Arlington, Virginia, this is Transport Topics Newsmakers, the digital interview series that gives you access to candid conversations between industry experts and a veteran reporter. Sponsored by Netrodyne. Here's your host, Dan Ronan.
Hello and welcome to this latest edition of Newsmakers from Transport Topics. I'm pleased to host this conversation with leading figures in the trucking, freight, and logistics industries. We have a great guest today, and we'll be talking about a very important topic for the future of the trucking industry. It's automation and what it will mean for fleets and driving in the driving community, drivers as well. We welcome from Pittsburgh, the CEO and founder of Locomation. He's the CEO, Çetin Meriçli. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin our conversation, I want to tell you that Netrodyne is the sponsor for this edition of Newsmakers. Their leadership has a short message they'd like to convey to all of you. So let's watch the message together, and we'll be back with our guest on the other side.
Netrodyne's Driver Eye is the most advanced video fleet safety solution, with artificial intelligence and edge computing built into the device to capture and analyze data immediately, creating real-time alerts for avoiding risky situations. With the highest definition camera on the market, Driver Eye offers clear visibility, including details such as license plates. The advanced AI recognizes speed limit signs, stoplights, stop signs, following distance, pedestrians, and other objects that most dash cams cannot detect. The optional interior camera captures and alerts on distracted or drowsy driving and seatbelt use, thus reducing risky driver behavior immediately. Netrodyne is the only safety system that captures and analyzes 100% of drive time, which provides a more complete safety picture, removing the guesswork for fleet managers and revealing the true cause of driving events. Managers can quickly see how each driver is performing through straightforward report summaries in the portal, without viewing a single video. Driver Eye captures and highlights proactive driving events, such as creating space for merging vehicles. These events add points to the driver score. Green Zone is the industry's first and only driver score built on positive driving versus solely focusing on negative events. The Driver Eye mobile app dynamically calculates the score, comparing it to the fleet average and congratulating drivers when they reach key milestones. Drivers can self-coach by reviewing key events with accompanying suggestions on how to improve performance and increase their scores. The virtual coach feature sends a weekly push alert for drivers to review their brief session via the app. Proof of session completion is documented in the portal. The Green Zone scores also provide an easy way for managers to reward drivers with prizes or bonuses. This positive recognition-based approach enables balanced interactions between managers and drivers, ultimately resulting in reduced risk and a safer fleet.
Now a little about Locomation and our founder and CEO, Çetin Meriçli. Thank you for joining us again from Pittsburgh. A little less than 3 years ago, a group of 5 experts who worked on autonomous transportation issues at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh and focusing at the National Robotics Engineering Center at that great university came together to form this company. It has been the forefront of developing technology for autonomous trucks. Late last summer, Locomation revealed it had successfully completed its first on-road pilot program, transporting freight with 2 trucks hauling trailers in a driverless convoy along a 420-mile stretch of road from Portland, Oregon to Napa, Idaho along Interstate 84. Welcome, Çetin, to Newsmakers. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Great pleasure to be here.
Let's start with a little bit of breaking news right off at the top of the conversation. At a recent event, the acting administrator of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, Meriçli, discussed the impact of autonomous trucking on the labor market, and her remarks have a lot of people talking. She said, "We can argue about the scope and timeline, but we cannot argue that this is a reality. There will be a major shift in the workforce. If it's your livelihood, that seems like it's being threatened, and it's an immediate problem." What do you say to those in the driving community who are fearful that with automation and platooning, that the trucking industry in 5, 7, 10 years won't be a viable industry?
So we recently published an op-ed written by our VP of Policy and Strategy, Finch Fulton, who spent the last couple of years at the US DOT, that I think reflects our views on it very, very nicely. I encourage all of the our listeners to go and check that out. To recap it a little bit, we see it as a multi-generation transition. It's not just a few years, and it's the impacts of automating trucks will not be felt in a negative way by the driver community today. If anything, we aspire to improve the quality of life, improve the conditions, improve the job quality in general of the drivers for the foreseeable future. We deeply believe that no truck driver today will actually lose their jobs to automation within their tenure.
Okay, so if you're a driver now and you're, let's say, 30s, 40s, and you still have a substantial chunk of your career ahead of you, you wouldn't be too worried if you had 15, 20 years left in your career.
I will definitely say so. Here's a very simple math around that. If we have had a magical wand and we can solve autonomous driving for all today, and every single truck we will make starting from tomorrow will be a fully autonomous truck that does not need any humans, it will take over 20 years to replace the current trucks on the roads. And we know that we are far away from that position anyway. So this is literally a multi-decade transition. Having said that, in the next 5-10 years, starting as soon as in the next 2 years with Locomation's groundbreaking technology, we will start to see automated trucks in some form on the roads, but this will be a relatively small subset compared to the millions of trucks on the roads today and hundreds of thousands of drivers doing this job today. And if anything, it will be beneficial for all the stakeholders, including the drivers, including the general public, including the trucking companies, carriers, and including the shippers.
Okay, so you think that there's not a lot of worry then? You wouldn't be worried then if you were getting into this industry then?
I would not be worried, but this is not to say that we should not be thinking about what it means in the future. It is, again, the scope and the timeline, these are in progress, so we don't exactly know what and how and when. We think that it's a multi-generational, multi-decade thing, but it is not an if question. It is going to happen. And at some point, there will be maybe more autonomous trucks than human-driven trucks on the roads. What that will mean for the general public, what that will mean for the workforce, what that will mean for the jobs of the future. So these are very, very valid questions. We don't have to be worrisome about them, but we should be prudent to start thinking about them. And here's the important part. At Locomation, the reason why we deeply believe in the human-guided autonomy in the foreseeable future is to basically start getting the technology out, start seeing the technology in the real world, and also making sure that we have enough white space, we have enough time to think about these critical problems, have the luxury to be proactive about that.
Everyone I talk to say that the biggest issue with platooning and autonomous trucks is not so much the technology, because as you know, in aviation for the airlines, much of the flying is automated. The pilots, the pilot and first officer, they're there to monitor the equipment and to make sure that everything's going okay. But it's public acceptance. It's the idea of a truck 70, 80,000 pounds going down the road. And there's a lot of public concerns about that. How do you overcome that public concern and get more public acceptance in that area? How do you do that?
People get concerned about, or people are afraid of things that they don't know. So the best way to address these is to inform people, to educate people, and to safely get people start blending with the technology. So get the technology out there so that people can see it in a safe manner, and over time develop comfort around it. That is one of the many factors that will go into wide-scale adoption of autonomous vehicles in general. It's valid for trucks, but it's valid for any kind of self-driving vehicle as well. We need to start informing people, and people need to start seeing these things on the roads, first in the human-guided way, so that they are accustomed to the view of it, and they know that from their own experience that this is safe. This is not a life-threatening hazard, or it's not a reckless deployment. There is work to be done there. We cannot just let people observe it with their eyes and draw their own conclusions. We need to help them with getting the right kind of information out there too. But taking the first step of getting the technology out of the test tracks and the early stage prototypes and package it in such a way that the general public can actually feel it, can actually touch it, can turn that into a tangible experience is the most important first step for longer term, wider adoption of this technology by the public.
Do you think that some of that acceptance will come as there becomes more autonomous, higher levels in personal vehicles, and that we see, you know, when you go to the showroom to buy a car now, you can buy something that is got the adaptive cruise control and all of the technology that's been built in over the last 7 or 8, 9 years. That as people become more comfortable with that, they'll become more comfortable with that in trucks, you know, the trucks, the Class 8, Class 7 trucks that were out there.
Partly, yes. Again, it all comes down to exposure. People, if you can experience a version of that, maybe a driver assistance version of that on your car, that the whole concept is not that foreign to you. Maybe you still have a little bit of a reservation on like how it would work on an 80,000-pound truck is a difference to be addressed. But in general, we need to people need to see this, and us, the technology vendors, the solution providers, our job is to find the fastest and the safest way of getting the technology out there so that we can kickstart that process as early as possible. Otherwise, it's going to stay as a science fiction experiment, and people will think about, oh, Terminator, the robots are coming and they're going to kill us. That could not be, I mean, I love science fiction, and Terminator is one of my favorite movies, but that couldn't be far away from reality. The robots, the technology, it's not about that. It's the overall level of AI and robotics is not at that threatening level. If anything, technology is going to make our lives better if we do our jobs right, and we aspire to do so. We wake up every day and try to do our best along those lines.
In my introduction, I talked about the recent news that you did the convoy and the platoon testing out on the west in Idaho, up in Washington. Has there been any other additional testing and trials that you've been working on since that point?
Yes, we have. So that particular testing was with Wilson Logistics, our first commercial partner, and that was wildly successful. We learned a lot. We demonstrated operational excellence. We demonstrated technology, and since then we've done other on-road pilots with some partners that we have not announced publicly yet. That's coming down the road. But yeah, we've been quite busy for the past couple of months.
And last month, your company also announced a partnership with Rush Enterprises, making them the primary installation and maintenance provider for the automated technology. Let's talk about that announcement for a few minutes. What does that mean to have a company such as Rush working with you in these particular areas?
If anything, it is a huge validation of our technology, and it's a huge validation that now is the time to start thinking about a cradle-to-grave life cycle management for automated trucks. What it means, where that who will install the technology on the trucks, who will maintain the technology, who will repair the technology, how are we going to provide warranty. And Rush is an excellent partner because they are already one of the largest players in the nation, not just in the truck dealer part, but their warranty services. They have hundreds of locations around the country that we will tap into in providing maintenance and repair services for our autonomous technology. So this is again a huge step towards thinking about not just demonstrating the technology, not just prototypes, not just limited runs, thinking about wide-scale deployment of our autonomous convoy technology.
Since you mentioned that there are so many trucks now out there on the road, do you believe that this is the type of technology that will be available to be sold as an aftermarket installation, where you buy a truck or you buy a used vehicle, and there are certain kits that can be installed to put the technology on and add it on, and then have the truck go from the existing standard to one that can work in the autonomous mode?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is that, of course, the devil is in the details.
Yeah, of course.
there are a lot of ifs there. The truck has to be compatible. It has to have the right other options to make it consistent with the rest of the autonomous system. The autonomous system will basically enable us to use the trucks in a much more efficient way. So the trucks will go through their life cycles much faster because they will be able to on the move almost around the clock with the automation system. So you need to make sure that you are putting it on as new of a truck as possible so that you can get the best ROI for the automation investment. But having said that, yes, the upfit or the retrofit approach we think is the fastest and the most prudent approach to get things started. Over time, of course, the parts of the technology will be deeply integrated with the OEMs and the tier ones, and maybe one day the entire thing will be available just by one click when you are buying your next truck. But that's another several years, at least several years of further progress. Everything moves much slower in the world of the traditional truck making or vehicle making landscape. We believe starting with an upfit technology will basically make it available to to customers, to fleets and shippers way sooner, so that we can start using the technology. And when we see the benefits of the technology in the real world, that is only going to incentivize the truck manufacturers to accelerate this deeper integration. So it's.
You mentioned the speed though of this, and that I'm amazed by the speed at which your company and others that are in this space have grown, because as you know, less than 4 years ago, you and the others who have formed your company were at Carnegie Mellon, and you were on the faculty there and in the lab and looking at autonomous and robotic technology. And now you've got a company that's out there. It's got to deal with Rush and others to do this. So this has come together pretty quickly though, hasn't it?
Well, it is in some sense, but it also is a good example of an overnight success in 10 years. So we have been, I'm doing AI and robotics for 20 years. My co-founders, some of them are even longer. Collectively, we have over 100 years of direct AV experience, and we've developed and deployed dozens of AV systems, including truck convoys for the military, and including the first production level autonomous truck system for Caterpillar. So we have been in this business, not just from an academic point of view. We have been getting our hands dirty and putting systems out there. And that vast accumulation of know-how and know-how not to enabled us to make decisions faster and more efficient when we decided to start locomotion. And hence, we were able to achieve quite a bit of progress in a few short years.
How will you, in your opinion, how will truck platooning and automation improve safety on the roads? And because I want to bring this up, a recent report from the National Safety Council, the esteemed organization outside of Chicago, said that 42,000 people died last year in automobile and truck accidents. Now, the majority of those involve four-wheelers. It's probably 90%. Pedestrians are certainly a portion of that as well. But there is a portion, 10% or less, involving trucks. And if that's a couple thousand people a year, that's still far too many. So how can automation and platooning start to tackle this problem when groups such as the Road to Zero Coalition and others have been out there really trying to work on this for a long time?
I think a human-guided convoying especially is an excellent way to improve safety. There are certain things humans are excellent at, like predicting what might happen in the next couple of seconds based on a lot of context and a lot of real-world cues. This is something machines are not so good at yet. But machines are extremely good at, if something drastic is happening, what is the fastest way to respond to it in a safe manner. You can think of it as emergency braking, or you can think of it as lane departure. Like, machines can look at everywhere and make hundreds, if not thousands of decisions a second. But their cognitive understanding of the world is rather limited. By combining an expert human driver, assisted and augmented with autonomous technology, is the best-in-class safety system that humanity has ever seen. Over time, maybe one day machines will surpass humans in every dimension, so they'll be able to even predict what might happen in the world in the next, I don't know, 10 seconds or so, then it is time to pass the baton and let the machines do everything. But until we have the evidence, until we have the proof that the machines actually surpass humans in every dimension, the best thing is to still rely on humans in areas where they excel at, but make sure that we are addressing their shortcomings. You mentioned several tens of thousands of people dying in an accident. If you look at the semi-truck involved accidents, majority of them are a semi-truck rear-ending the stopped or slowed down traffic because humans are not fast enough to react to a sudden change. Machines are perfect there if you can build them in a reliable enough manner. Humans are perfect in understanding, oh, this driver seems a little bit reckless, and I saw that person was looking at the phone, not at the road. Combining these in our proprietary ways is going to, right out of the gate, make the entire roads safer, and is going to give us further opportunities to collect data to improve the system. Or every mile we drive is going to make not just the current system safer, but will also chip into the safety of the future technology.
And as I understand it, then, at least in the initial stages, the plans are to use the autonomous technology on the open roads and then have the driver take the truck and handle it the last 5 miles, 7 miles on the state highway or whatever road that is, the city road that it is, to get it to the warehouse or the fulfillment center, whatever that is.
That's correct. That's correct, because we think that we shouldn't have to wait until we completely solve autonomous driving for trucks on complicated urban scenarios before we start delivering the benefits of automation.
You've said that you plan to begin some of the testing in the Pittsburgh area, and I love Western Pennsylvania, and I love the Pittsburgh area. And I will tell you, though, that the Pittsburgh area is one of the more interesting areas of the country to drive in. You have very narrow roads, you have hills, bridges, tunnels, and other challenges. Is the feeling among your team that if you can make the technology work in Western Pennsylvania, you can make it work anywhere?
There are more interesting cases around Pennsylvania. We have been testing in Pittsburgh area for over 2 years now, and we have been testing in Ohio. We recently did a multi-state testing, starting in Pittsburgh, going all the way to Detroit, so Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and back. And these some of the very interesting highway segments. Our pilot with Wilson Logistics last summer between Portland and Nampa, Idaho, the I-84, is one of the, if not the most interesting highway segments. Tight curves, uphill, downhill, side winds, forest on the side. It's just wonderful. Of course, there's always something new to be learned. There's always something extra to be tried in every geography, every road. So we cannot just say that if it works in Pittsburgh, it is guaranteed to work everywhere else. But I think it is safe to say that if we can make it work in Pittsburgh, we are a long way, we are really close to making it work in a lot of other places.
Okay, that's a fair enough answer. Your state, the state of Pennsylvania, seems to be pretty receptive to this technology too. Last legislative session, the lawmakers up in Harrisburg passed a bill that allows for platooning for up to 3 automated buses and military vehicles and trucks on interstates beginning in the spring. So spring is here, and my question to you then is, when does the testing begin now that you have the legal authority?
Right. Again, we've had our authorization to go and test on a one-on-one basis. We've been waiting for the legislation to kick in, but we didn't have to wait for that. We've already applied and got our authorization, got our little cool stickers that go on our trucks, indicating that this truck is part of a platoon over a year ago. So this is going to make things a little bit more streamlined, maybe, but it actually is not going to change our schedule. Our schedule is already in full swing.
There are a number of other states as well that appear to be pretty receptive to this, besides Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona. And so far, by my count, 27 states have approved some sort of platooning laws. But the legislation here in Washington, D.C. on the federal level has been stalled. Does that concern you that there's no consistent policy on the federal level, but yet the states are setting their own rules and regulations?
Not at all, because at this point, I think we have enough critical mass in the statewide legislation. And we also see that new states, when a state starts looking into this problem, instead of rediscovering the wheel, reinventing the wheel, they go and look at what other states did before. So there is a natural emergence of some common wisdom, if you will. A very good example to that is when we decided to do our tests in Idaho. Idaho did not have any supporting legislation, but we got in touch with their DOT, and in a matter of, I think it was 2 weeks or even less, we were able to communicate with them, and they looked at what we already have with Pennsylvania, which is a very detailed, very rigorous authorization process. We were able to get them to adopt it. We went through the same application process with them and turned Idaho proverbial green when it comes to allowing platoons and autonomous deployments. So what we see now is that this is not a very foreign concept anymore. Sure, the patchwork is not ideal, but it's not a roadblock either. Now with enough states buying in, enough states having something in place, we believe the role of the federal legislation, if and when that day comes, is going to be more about unifying and turning it into a coherent body of legislation instead of rewriting it or instead of changing the direction. The momentum is already very exciting. We just think one day it's going to be just unified and just consolidated.
We've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. I want to ask you a couple of other questions. How far apart will the trucks be in a platoon situation? Is there a distance, 17 feet, 20 feet? What's the distance that they'll operate the most effectively and the safest?
Right. So it's not a fixed number. It's a real-time measurement of multiple factors, including the speed of the convoy, including the road grade, if you are going uphill, downhill, including some other maybe weather for the day, etc. And of course, the relative load differences of two trucks. If one truck is heavier than the other, what that truck can do, what is the braking performance, etc. So we have our proprietary ways of measuring that and calculating a time gap that is now that is then turned into a distance gap. The time gap in the commercial setup is going to be most likely at half a second or less, which will turn into something less than 15 meters at highway speeds. You can anticipate it can go all the way down to maybe 8 to 10 meters or stay around 15 meters, depending on, again, a multitude of factors.
Okay. So a lot of this does depend on wireless technology. And there's been a lot of concern, as you know, in Washington, D.C. about that recent decision by the FCC for the reallocation of the 5.9 gigahertz radio spectrum. This is technology that, for our listeners and for our viewers, that had been allocated 20 years ago specifically for this type of autonomous vehicle technology. But it has now been, according to the FCC, it's now going to be given to the wireless companies, Verizon and the others, for enhanced wireless technology. What is this a setback to your effort?
Not at all. When we started designing our system, we've charted out our system architecture in such a way that it is agnostic of this protocols or agnostic of these components. So whatever wireless technology is available to us, our system is not impacted, because in our particular case, it is more about just 2 trucks or 3 trucks talking to each other, and not them talking to other vehicles or not them talking to infrastructure. One day there will be applications for that too, but that is rather down the road, and our immediate needs can be satisfied with any sufficient wireless point-to-point protocol.
How do you answer those critics that say, okay, I understand the technology, it sounds good in theory, but we can't 100% of the time get our cell phones to work without dropping a phone call and losing a cell phone. How can we make sure that truck A here is in constant wireless communication, and that also there's also security concerns that somehow or another the security and the conversation between the two trucks electronically can't be broken?
Right. We don't answer those questions. The established industry standards do. Before we put anything on the roads, we have to make sure that we are in compliance with standards around functional safety and standards around cybersecurity. So whatever those standards dictate, they also take into account potential hardware failures, potential security breaches, etc. So before we can actually turn the keys of our autonomous system to any customer, we will have to know that we are in compliance with those standards, and that implicitly will solve this problem. So for instance, if we need to put two separate types of radio devices in order to fit the standard, we will do so. If we have to implement a certain protocol to make sure that the cybersecurity plays in place, we will do so. Some of these things are still in a little bit motion. So over the next couple of quarters, the rest of this year, I think we will see a lot more clarity in what it means to be compliant or what it means to be safe enough.
And as you said, during all of this testing and for the next several years, there's always going to be a second driver in the other vehicle. She may not have their hands on the wheel, but they're still going to be sitting there monitoring the vehicle.
They will be off duty, disengaged, and taking their rest in the sleeper berth. So we don't anticipate the second driver to be ready to take over at a moment. But the reason why we are calling it an autonomous convoy is that that second truck is a level 4 truck. So the truck itself, whatever happens on the road, including hardware failures, including radio failures, etc., is going to be able to act safely. In the very, very worst case, it will be able to achieve what they call a minimal risk condition, which is come to a safe stop somewhere and wait for the driver to take over. Of course, we are building the system in such a way that this is going to be a very rare occurrence, if at all.
In conclusion, let me ask you this as we wrap things up. Let's push the calendar ahead. Let's look out at 2030. Where will platooning and autonomous vehicle technology be then? Will we see platooning routine, AV technology routine? Will it now be something that's widespread and day-to-day use on our roads?
I think human-guided convoys will be here to stay. We will always see them in certain applications, in certain routes, and in certain situations. Long after we actually get to a point where we can deploy individual autonomous trucks. There's always, maybe a particular weather condition that a human-guided convoy can handle, but an autonomous truck cannot handle yet. Or it just makes some scheduling and some energy efficiency sense by the drafting, that it just makes sense to send multiple trucks in the same way. So long after we make more progress with the individual solo driverless applications, the versions of human-guided convoys will always be around. So come 2030, we anticipate tens of thousands of trucks operating in human-guided convoy fashion.
Thank you for joining us. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I know that it's one that you have put with your team your heart and soul into, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's such a delight.
In closing, we want to thank Locomation and its CEO, Çetin Meriçli, for joining us here on Newsmakers, for being so generous with his time to answer our questions and talk with us. We also want to thank our sponsor, Netrodyne, for making this Transport Topics Newsmaker possible. We appreciate their fine support. Going forward, we plan more of these Newsmakers in the very near future. We will have an announcement soon about the next webcast, when that will take place and who the guest will be. Also, this webcast will be available for on-demand viewing. Go to ttnews.com for more information about how you can catch our interview. I'm Dan Ronan from Transport Topics. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us today. For more information on future episodes, visit ttnews.com. This has been Transport Topics Newsmakers.